Greetings, Algebra people. This is Dr. Heron talking to you about properties of numbers. We're talking about notes number 3. Now, most of these properties are going to make sense, but we call them properties basically because they describe kind of how numbers behave whenever you're going to do either addition or multiplication. And I'll show you why it doesn't work for subtraction or division here in a moment, but for the most part, this is how you can expect numbers to behave when you're dealing with numbers. Okay, so 5 properties. All right, so if you want to think about it, there's like a C, A, D, I, so maybe Caddy or Katie, if you want to remember a moniker for them. So let's kind of talk about what we're dealing with here. So the first one is called commutative. Okay, commutative. A lot of kids suddenly like to pronounce it with a commutative, like they're at an N where there's not an N. And basically what this says is that the order in which you add or multiply doesn't matter. Okay, so what that means is, 7 plus 3 is the same thing as 3 plus 7. 4 times 5 is the same thing as 5 times 4. I can mix around those without having any kind of, I'm not going to change the problem at all. Okay, and that's different than if I said, well, you know what? No, 7 minus 3 is not the same thing as 3 minus 7. Okay, that's not going to work. And this is similar. 4 divided by 5 is not the same thing as 5 divided by 4. Okay, so that's why this only works for addition and multiplication. Associative property thinks about who do I associate with, and it doesn't really matter the order I associate with people. So grouping does not change what I'm doing. Okay, so kind of what that means is if I have 3 and 8 and 10, if I add the 3 and the 8 first, I'm going to get 11 plus 10, so I'm going to get 21. If I group the 8 and 10 first, that's 3 plus 18, that's also 21. So it doesn't matter which one I do first, I'm still going to get the same answer. And similar with multiplication. So if I take 2 times 4 times 8, if I multiply these two together first, that's 8 times 8 is 64. If I take 2 times 4 times 8, multiply the 4 times 8, that's going to be 64 as well. The order in which I multiply doesn't matter. That's kind of the big picture here. Distributive property, the third one, is probably the one that you're most familiar with, or at least it's been addressed. It's probably at least been talked to about you. And the basic premise is, if I have one thing multiplied by a group, then I can multiply each part of that and get the same thing. So basically, if I have 7 and then a plus 6, that's the same thing as 7a plus 42. So if I distribute that, 7a plus 42, that's going to be my answer. Okay, and this one's a little bit weird because, like this one, kind of put a caveat. This one does work with subtraction. So if I go like, y minus 4, that is the same thing as 7y minus 28. But remember, I got to kind of keep that subtraction sign with it. So that one does kind of work with subtraction, but that's about the only one. Identity says if I add 0 or multiply by 1, I don't change what's happening. Okay, so 7 plus 0 equals 7. 9 times 1 equals 9. That will come into play later. This is actually kind of a big rule, especially when you start thinking about simplifying fractions, because 1 can look a lot of different ways, and it'll make more sense later when we talk about that. And finally, the last one, inverse, says if I add the opposite or multiply by the reciprocal, I'm going to basically kind of get rid of everything. So if I add the opposite, so if I take 21 and add negative 21 or subtract 21, I'm going to get 0. If I take 17 and I multiply it by 1 over 17, I'm going to get 1. Okay? So that is kind of the idea. So commutative, associative, distributive, identity, inverse. Okay, so identity just says, you are who you are. And inverse says, well, if I do the complete opposite of you, you're going to go away. Also, one last detail down here to note. It's not really a number property, but it's a product property. Just any number times 0 is 0. So, if I take 37 times 0 is 0. If I take x times 0, my answer is 0. Anything times 0, my answer is going to be 0. Okay, so now, taking a look at some of these properties here. I'm not asking you to simplify, there is an equal sign, so I'm not asking you to solve. I'm asking you to tell me what property am I using? What property shows up? Okay, so I go from 5 times 10 minus x equals 50 minus 5x. So what I need to do is multiply this and this. So I'm going to go 50 minus 5x equals 50 minus 5x. So what did I do? I distributed through the property. Okay, I distributed through the property. That's my property, distributive property. Number 2, 5 times 6 equals 6 times 5. So all I did was change the order. So 5 times 6 equals 6 times 5. So I'm just going to change that to commutative. Okay, that goes back to that order up above. A times b equals b times a. So this would be commutative with multiplication. Then 25 plus 30, 30 plus 25, that's also going to be commutative. But that time it's going to be with addition. All right, so I'm not looking for you to just crunch numbers, throw numbers in a calculator and get an answer. I'm looking for what rule am I following here? Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of simplifying here, a little bit of, this would be like combining like terms. So I've got a 6.8a, 9.14b, minus 4.37a, and minus 0.88b. So 6.8a. So what allows me to do this is I can move this over, then I can put the b thing there. So what I did was collectively put the a's together and put the b's together. So why am I allowed to do that? Well, where it says the order doesn't matter, that's commutative. Okay, that's commutative. That's what I did. Okay, so that's kind of why I'm able to do that. So that's going to be 2.43a, 9.14 minus 0.88, 0.88 is going to be 8.26b. So now number 17. Okay, just mentally, without a calculator, if I take 17 times 0.25, that's not one I can easily do in my head. All right, so I'm not going to do that. But what is easy to do is 0.25 times 4. 0.25 times 4, that is just 1. So what allows me to multiply that first is going to be the associative property. Remember, the associative property says, doesn't matter which two I multiply together first, I'm still going to end up with the same answer, so my answer is just going to be 17. Now, if I look at number 8, 19 plus 44 minus 19a plus 44 minus 19a. So now if I simply move the second and third thing, okay, what allows me to do that is going to be associative. And then 19a minus 19a, so that's kind of like adding the opposite. So that's going to completely just become 0. So that's going to be my identity. No, not my identity. Sorry. My inverse property. Because if I add the complete opposite, it goes away and becomes 0. So my final answer is going to be 44. So number 9, oh no, a fraction, what do I do? Don't panic. I'm going to distribute this. But now look, 9 times 5 over 9 times y minus 9 times 1/3. Okay, 9 over 9, well, first off, I'm using distributive. Then 9 over 9 is just 1, so I'm left with 5y. Okay, so that would be, so then 9 times 1/3, that's the same thing as 9 divided by 3, so that's just going to be 3. There's my answer, 5y minus 3. And the very last thing, anything times 0 is going to simply be 0, and that is just the 0 product property. Okay, so that is it. What do you do next? Next, you work on the Unit 1, Practice 3. You're going to check your answers, and you're going to ask questions on the ones you got wrong. All right. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.